Yeah. All I need is one mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic.
Hey everybody, welcome back to One Mic, where I watch shit so you don't have to. And today I'm here to talk about Season 2, Episode 7 of the HBO series Euphoria, entitled The Theater and Its Double. I think in this episode, the theater's double is essentially real life, as we've seen in the show up to this point. Lexi's been kind of like chronicling a lot of what's happened throughout the course of the season, presumably for inclusion in her play, but and I think we might see some of that in the finale. But in this episode, it was kind of interesting because the play was kind of used to provide a little bit more context into some of the stuff we've seen happening this season. Like, a lot of what we saw in the play wasn't information we already knew. It was new information that we were finding out from past moments. And I thought the concept of this episode was pretty interesting. I'm going to talk briefly about what I liked about it, what I didn't. And I think what makes this episode cool in a way is how they really kind of like, it's actually both a pro and a con, how they kind of bleed together the play and real life. They have really cool moments where it's like you might be seeing a scene happening between the characters of Lexi and Rue, and then the camera will pull back and you'll see like a play setup, a stage setup, and then next time you see them, it's the actors who are playing the characters of, I didn't even bother writing down the names that Lexi gave to the characters in the play, but you'll see it was like the actors who were playing the characters instead of the actual characters. And that's cool, like visually, to have something like that where it's like a real moment, then it pulls out to the play. And whoever directed this episode did a great job of kind of making that really seamless. But what makes that tricky though is that there are times where it's difficult for me as the viewer to understand what's happening when the intermingling of the play and real life get a little bit too confusing. It's almost like there were moments where the show went a little bit too far up its own ass, I think, in this episode. And granted, those are few and far between. I like this episode, but okay, for instance, there's a scene where it's Nate and Cassie, and it's lit. The scene is lit the same way as the play, which a lot of times we would see, and we would cut to the play scenes, you know, like how you would generally see a play be lit. The lights are down, and then you have spotlights on the individual actors. And you might have an actor who's like doing a monologue or something, and there's a spotlight just on that person, and everything around them is dark. And we saw a lot of that in this episode where like actors would be spotlighted, and everything around them would be dark. And there was like a scene where I think like Nate was helping Cassie get ready for something, and it was lit like that in like a spotlight kind of way, but it wasn't the play because it was actually Nate and Cassie and not the actors who were playing those characters within the play. So it's like things like that. It got a little muddy with me to like kind of like fully understand what was happening at times when it would kind of blur that line between the play and real life. But that was fairly rare. That like another thing that they did that I didn't particularly like was at the very beginning, they have this overture kind of like a title card kind of. And what I can liken it to most is kind of like the if you're familiar with it, the gag that they do on Family Guy where Peter like falls down and hurts his knee and he goes like like over, and it goes on really long. And that gag transitions because it starts off funny, and then you kind of go like, okay, well, this is going on kind of long. And then it goes on so ridiculously long that it becomes funny again. But this wasn't a gag. This was just keeping this overture title card on the screen for too long. And that went from like, okay, I see we're going to kind of structure this kind of like Lexi's play, or this is going to be Lexi's play. Okay, this is kind of cool. To, all right, well, this is going on kind of long. And then not to the next step being, okay, now I'm enjoying this again. The next step is I get the fucking point, start the fucking episode. So like that was a little bit too much. But a lot of the ways that they did this I thought were really, really cool. And like I said, I like the fact that we learned new things, and I like the fact that they did some trickery at times where it kind of would bleed into like I said, most of the time I liked it when they would kind of like blur that line, not blur the line, but like these like cool transitions. I think in between the play and real life. I thought those transitions were pretty cool from a technical perspective. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we learned about many of our major characters here, and that's going to kind of be what I'm going to spend most of my time on. And not spending too much time on the play itself or the differences in it or whatnot. I think we've spent already 5 minutes on that. I think that's enough time. So Lexi's the star of the play. And for starters, I think this is interesting just on its face because throughout the whole episode, we see Lexi kind of observing these big moments in everyone's life, almost as like she's someone who's watching a TV show or a play. And she's like looking at these things, taking it in as an outside party, as a witness, and then throughout this season, we've seen her like really like noting these things, but just by the product of making her the central focus of the play, it's an interesting kind of I guess like a comparison in that like as an outside party, as a third party, she's watching these events happen, and they don't. She's not an actual involved party, but by putting herself as the main person in the play, even though she's technically like outside of these events, we're seeing them from her perspective, and that makes her the main character of the play. So she's kind of like using her the fact that she's not directly involved in a lot of these events to somehow still make herself the centerpiece of the play. And I think that kind of is interesting because we start off with her very much showing that she's been jealous of Cassie kind of growing up. Cassie developing early. She had a moment where she talked about like at 433 days, I could expect to look just like Cassie. And that time comes and Cassie's just like, yeah, some people just ain't meant to have big titties. I don't know what to tell you. And I think that the fact that she was clearly very jealous of Cassie, and not in a mean or spiteful way, just kind of just like, oh, wow, I wish I had that body or whatever. The fact that she was jealous of Cassie, I think, makes it that much more interesting that she made herself the focal point of this play. So I thought that was pretty cool. Let's see, what else did I have about Lexi here? I already said all that stuff. Also, a lot of the stuff involving Lexi also kind of bled into what appears to be something traumatic that could be happening involving Fez or Ash. Like we see throughout her play, she keeps looking at a seat that she had reserved for Fez, and he's not there. And then also throughout the episode, we see moments where Fez is getting ready to go to the play. So we see him, and by the way, all of this stuff I think is just adorable because it's interesting that you have a character like Fez. That's the second time I've made like a mistake where I've called somebody a player, like it's sports. Anyway, when you have a character like Fez who is a drug dealer who deals with a lot of gangster shit, has to deal with a lot of serious situations where his life is on the line, doing things like steaming a shirt or asking someone tie or no tie, this big bouquet of flowers. Like, he is smitten with this girl. And like the fact that we see that he doesn't make it to the play, at least in the portion of this episode that we see, I think it does a really good job of building up that tension that something's gonna happen here. I'm thinking something's probably gonna happen to Ash because they're making it seem like something happens to Fez by focusing on him not being there, but he could also not be there if he's tending to something involving Ashtray. So, but I still think that that's something that we should probably be dreading in the finale. It's going to be something that whatever happens is not going to be good. But what we see is Fez is getting ready, and that dude, I think his name is Custer or something like that, the dude, Faze guy or whatever that she was kicking it with, he comes over, and we already know he's an informant. And he puts like his phone on the table or something, and Ash sees him whispering something to Faye. And for us, we know he says something like, I think he says "be cool" or something like that. And Ash sees this and grabs a box cutter and positions himself in the living room. And I think the last time we see this particular scene is Fez saying something to the effect of like, he's about to walk out the door and he's like, "Is everything okay?" And I think that's the last time we see it. So it's going to be real interesting to see what happens there. But back to Lexi real quick, though. We also see some scenes from the past that are from her perspective, which differs from Cassie's perspective. Like there's a scene where they are observing their dad passed out drunk on a bench. And we see Cassie decides that she's okay with getting in the car. Like, it's not that big a deal. She doesn't want to cause any problems. And Lexi's like, I don't think this is a good idea. And I thought they were going to leave Lexi because she doesn't even get in the car at first. But then we see her in the back crying, and she's like squeezing the ice cream cone, and the ice cream falls on the seat. And I believe we saw this earlier, and I think, I want to say like season 1 or something, where we see this same scene, but it plays out differently because we don't have the context to it. And I think that's what makes this episode cool, is that it, like I said, it provides context to things that we see present day that we might not have understood had we not, or we didn't understand everything without the context that's provided in this episode. So I thought that was pretty cool. And then there's the scene where Lexi and her family are all dancing together, the actors who play them within the play. And they were all dancing together and having a good time. And this presumably before her dad ends up leaving them. And everybody who was the actual characters in the show, Rue, all of them, they all seem to really like that scene. So I thought that was a nice moment to kind of give Cassie before Cassie ends up doing what Cassie ends up doing. But we'll get to that in a moment. Maddie, we find out that Lexi wasn't actually a big fan of Maddie originally until a situation with her parents resulted in Maddie living with them for a little bit. And I love this scene because, again, providing context, if you see the scene that takes place in this episode that is post Rue revealing that Nate and Cassie have been sleeping together, if you hadn't seen this flashback, the scene that we see doesn't hit as hard. But there's a moment where we see just after that where Cassie's hiding in the bathroom crying, and Maddie's like banging on the door, yelling at her like, I would never do this to you. You fucked up our friendship, all this kind of stuff, right? And this is following a scene where we see after Maddie had moved into their house in the past, Cassie offered up her bed to like basically just console Maddie, who laid in her bed and cried. And when you see that, and then you see what happened, and then, well, we know what happened with Cassie and Nate, and now Maddie screaming at her through the door. It makes that scene more powerful when you see what they were like prior to that. And not like prior to that, just like what they've been like on this show, but the like how their friendship really was a true friendship. Like, hey, you can come in my bed and I'll hold you while you cry kind of friendship, to where it is right now. And I think that like that made that scene much more powerful. So I like that the way they edited that to kind of like feed right into like, hey, here's what was happening in the past and how good their friendship was, and then we're gonna smooth feed right into post Nate revelation, and now you understand just how big of a deal this is. Like, you already knew based on everything we've seen on the show with Maddie and Nate, but it's bigger than just boyfriend, girlfriend, caddy kind of stuff. Like, this is a friendship that was a really true friendship / sisterhood that was ruined because of Cassie's decisions. So I thought that was a pretty cool thing there as well. And then also with Maddie, we see Minka Kelly's character. They have a conversation. I can't. Were they in the pool again? I can't recall. But they have a conversation, and at the end of the conversation, Minka Kelly's character, I don't know why I can't remember her name, gives Maddie a gift, and it's one of the dresses that Maddie had been trying on, which I think proves my theory that there's a camera in there. I can't really call it a theory because I think the show was trying to tell us that there's a camera within her clock. So that was an interesting little confirmation of something as well. And then moving on to Rue, we find out that Rue and Jules haven't been talking since their whole blow up, even in like these really awkward situations where they're like in the bathroom at the same time, washing their hands 2 sinks away from each other. They're still not talking. They exchange a lot of glances throughout the course of the play, or at least I wouldn't say they exchange glances, but they glance over at each other several times before they actually do briefly lock eyes. And then we also see that it appears that Rue's mom has given up on Rue, which is really sad because she's kind of like in this position where she's like, okay, I could lose 2 daughters or I can lose 1. So if you're going to be, basically she's like, if you're going to be stuck on stupid, I just got to let you go. Like, you're going to be 18 and there's not really anything else I can do about you. I think she said you'll be 18, you're going to be out of here. There's not like, so she already fully intends on kicking her out the house. She says all these things about Gia, like she's getting bad grades and in math, she's doing this, she's doing that. And all of these things to hammer home the point. You've been so fucked up on drugs, you don't have any idea about your sister, because Rue says like, Gia fine, like don't worry about her, and it's like, no, Gia's not fine, and it's not, it's everything's not about you, and she says that like you've been so concerned, the only person you think of is yourself, and that's the case. Rue's been wallowing in her own depression over her father's death, and then getting herself into drugs, and then being obsessed with her own high and staying high and doing drugs and tricking people and doing everything she needs to do to continue to get high, that she's not seeing how she's affecting other people. So she's thinking like, oh, I know Gia's smart, like she's fine, but she's not noticing that, well, one, Gia lost her father too, and now two, Gia also has to worry about her junkie sister who's doing all sorts of fucking craziness all the time, and that's gonna affect her too. So like, I really like the fact that the mother hammers home the idea that Rue is essentially being selfish. Like we see it, we don't see it, I think, as easily because the show is about Rue. So like we feel like when we see that kind of thing, it's like, okay, Rue is the central character, so you don't notice that as much. But the mother really hammered that nail home by laying out all the ways in which Gia is struggling to Rue, who's completely oblivious to it, and we're just like, shit, we were oblivious to it too, because they don't show it, but they don't show it because it makes this scene more powerful to learn that Gia has her own struggles as well, and Rue is not concerned with that. And now the mother's at a point where it's like, okay, I've tried everything I can with Rue. Let me save Gia while I can. And it's a really sad moment. But I want to wrap up with talking about Nate real quick. So let's just talk about this final. It's not the final scene, but close to the final scene. This big performance of all the football players or whatever in the locker room, and this scene is wildly over the top. I thought it was incredibly entertaining. Like Ethan had like the doing like this dick jizz gun. Like there's like this punching bag and like these balls that are like used to make a penis that like jizzes everywhere. Like it's like this incredibly homoerotic performance that pokes fun at something that I can kind of see the idea of especially for women, to look at the camaraderie that men have in locker rooms and like make it into something homosexual. And I think from Lexi's perspective, she doesn't think that all these people are gay, but she's kind of making a thing like poking fun at how men can simultaneously be incredibly homophobic, but then also be naked in the locker room, like slapping each other on the dick, like whatever it is that they do in there. Because I was never on the football team, but I think that for her, it's kind of just like poking fun at the irony of this and how people don't really like see this or ever make this point. But it seems to hit home pretty hard for Nate, which, I mean, I feel like we've always kind of had reason to suspect that Nate struggles with his sexuality. And, I know. We've always had reason to suspect that. But Nate really responds pretty poorly to this. And we also see during another one of these sequences that it goes back and forth between, and this show does this a lot, where it kind of like tiptoes the line between reality and fantasy. But there's a scene in particular that just seems to seamlessly transition between reality and fantasy. And it ends with Cal essentially mounting his son, which would lead into my theory from last week when they talked about something that happened to Nate when he was 8 or 9, and ever since then he's been different. And you guys have said in the comments that I think it involved this other kid. I said on the video that I wondered if if Cal molested Nate. This seems to kind of lend some credence to that theory. But Nate blows up. He walks out. He dumps Cassie, tells her to get her shit and move out. And Cassie, the episode ends with Cassie returning to the doors. And what is like a ridiculously like funny, dramatic thing of her like breathing, like like breathing onto the window and the door, which I don't know why I thought that was so funny, but I'm like, man, she's about to go ape shit, and she definitely is. So overall, I thought this episode was pretty good. Like I said, it had some moments where it in my opinion got a little bit too far up its own ass, but like I really respect this show's willingness to swing for the fences, and it did that in this episode by doing something crazy like having a a fictional play within a fictional show that's about these fictional characters, and blurring that line even further by seamlessly transitioning between the quote unquote reality for the characters within the show and then the play itself. So like there was some really cool stuff there. It's just there were just times where I think it got a little bit too muddy, a little bit too murky, and I think they were trying to do a little bit too much here when the concept itself was already clear. You don't have to take a concept that on its face is a little bit complex and then just sprinkle on more complexity on top of it for no reason. So like there was a little bit too much of that, but still, I thought the episode was really good. I enjoyed everything that I learned about Lexi and Cassie's childhood, Lexi and Rue's relationship, like because that was interesting too. Like they teased it, but like we really see like these two were pretty close prior to Rue's father dying. So I thought that was interesting. The girls watching the play and coming to the realization that it's about them, I thought was really good. So lots of great stuff here. It looks like they're setting up for an incredibly explosive finale. I didn't know this was meant to be a 2-part finale, but apparently it is. I would imagine most of this, the play is largely over, I would think, and that a lot of this next episode is going to be more so the fallout from the play as opposed to a little bit more like the same style, like of mixing the reality with the play world. I think like it'll end that way, but I mean, I think the play is already kind of over. Like it was supposed to end with that big homoerotic sequence at the end, but I still think there could be some more. I don't know if that's an intermission, but that's another thing that was a little murky too, because I'm sitting there like, how long is this play going on? Why does it have Hamilton's budget? Like they had a whole rotating thing on the set. I mean, I don't know where these girls live, and maybe it's a very affluent area, but man, that play had a budget. But anyway, I'm at 21 minutes, so that's all I'm going to have for now, and I will see you guys next week for the season 2 finale. This has been a great season. Can't wait to see how it ends. Peace.